right, so are you ready for a deep dive today?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. Buckle up. Because today's deep dive takes us into...
A real life.
Yeah, a real-life aviation thriller. Aloha Airlines Flight 243. We're talking about survival against unbelievable odds, right?
Yeah.
You know how sometimes you hear about a plane having to make an emergency landing? Well, imagine this. What if a plane just lost a huge chunk of its roof?
Mid-flight.
Mid-flight.
Yeah.
That's the scenario we're diving into today.
It's a case that reveals a lot about not just the limits of engineering, but
Human resilience.
human resilience as well. We're going back to 1988, a seemingly ordinary day in Hawaii. So picture a routine inter-island flight, passengers enjoying the sunshine, completely unaware that they're about to face a fight for their lives at 24,000 feet.
You're painting a picture of such normalcy.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the story so unsettling.
Right.
It's a reminder that disaster can strike even in the unexpected places. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the human factor adds another layer of complexity. Because according to reports, one passenger actually noticed a crack on the plane's exterior while boarding, but they didn't report it. Wow. So it's a chilling example of how even small details dismissed as insignificant can have enormous consequences.
Wow. That makes you think about all the times we might overlook potential warning signs in our own lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got passengers settling in. Maybe some are heading to Honolulu for vacation. Others on business trips, oblivious to the danger lurking just minutes away.
Yeah, and then just 20 minutes after takeoff, chaos erupts.
Oh my God.
A section of the roof tears away in a deafening explosion.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the sudden decompression, the temperature plummeting to a bone-chilling negative 45 degrees Celsius.
Oh my.
500-kilometer-per-hour winds ripping through the cabin. It would felt like the world was literally being torn apart.
It's hard to even fathom the terror those passengers must have felt. This wasn't just a bumpy ride. This was a fight for survival.
Absolutely. And tragically, the force of the explosion was so strong that one of the air hostesses, CB Lansing, was swept out of the plane.
Oh my God.
It's a heartbreaking reminder of the raw power of nature and the fragility of human life.
This detail really drives home the gravity of the situation. I can't even imagine the chaos and fear inside that cabin. What happened next?
Well, to make matters worse, the oxygen mask system malfunctions.
Oh no.
Passengers are gasping for air, their bodies struggling to cope with the sudden drop in air pressure.
Yeah.
They're facing a very real threat of hypoxia.
Hypoxia. Can you explain that for those of us who aren't pilots or doctors?
Sure. So hypoxia sets in rapidly when your body is deprived of oxygen.
Okay.
It's like your brain slowly shutting down.
Wow.
First comes confusion, then disorientation, and if it continues, unconsciousness, and eventually death.
Oh my gosh. So this is where it gets really interesting. We're talking about people in a life or death situation, their ability to think clearly compromised by the lack of oxygen.
Exactly. And in the midst of this chaos, we see incredible acts of heroism emerge. Air hostess Michelle Honda, realizing the gravity of the situation, frantically searches for anyone on board who might know how to fly a plane.
Wow, a truly desperate measure in a desperate situation.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, up in the cockpit, it must have been absolute pandemonium.
The cockpit door was gone, ripped away by the force of the explosion, exposing the pilots to the elements.
Wow.
Captain Robert Schomsheimer and First Officer Mimi Tompkins were not only battling a severely damaged aircraft, but also their own shock and disorientation. Remember, they too would have been experiencing the initial effects of hypoxia.
What a horrifying situation.
Oh.
They're trying to fly a plane with a gaping hole in it, the cognitive functions impaired, and all while hurtling through the air at incredible speed. Talk about pressure.
And it wasn't just the hole in the fuselage they had to contend with.
Oh no. What else?
The plane's nose was drooping, one engine had failed, and there was a 10,000-foot mountain looming directly in their path.
Oh my gosh.
To make matters even worse, the nose gear was malfunctioning, meaning landing safely was going to be a major challenge.
So they were dealing with mechanical failures, environmental hazards, and their own physiological limitations. It's almost unbelievable that they managed to maintain control.
It really is a testament to their training and skill.
Yeah.
Despite these overwhelming challenges, Captain Schomsheimer and First Officer Tompkins managed to regain control of the aircraft. They initiated an emergency descent, skillfully navigating the crippled plane through treacherous conditions, all while battling the clock and the effects of hypoxia.
It's a truly remarkable feat of airmanship. Their ability to remain calm and focused in the face of such adversity is simply astounding.
It's a reminder that even in the most dire circumstances, human skill and determination can make a difference. However, it's also important to remember that this story isn't just about heroism, it's also about systemic failures. The investigation that followed revealed a series of issues within Aloha Airlines, and indeed the wider aviation industry that contributed to this near disaster.
Okay, let's unpack that. What exactly did the investigators uncover? What led to this catastrophic event?
Well, one key factor was the age of the aircraft. The Boeing 737 involved in the incident was nearing the end of its 20-year service life and had already completed nearly 90,000 flight cycles.
Flight cycles, can you explain what that means?
Sure. Each flight cycle essentially represents a takeoff and landing.
Okay.
So this particular aircraft had gone through nearly 90,000 takeoffs and landings, which is significantly more than Boeing had recommended for this model.
So the plane was essentially overworked, like a car with way too many miles on it.
That's a good analogy. The constant pressurization and depressurization that occurred during each flight cycle put immense stress on the aircraft structure, especially the fuselage.
Okay.
And the more cycles a plane goes through, the greater the risk of metal fatigue and potential failure.
That makes sense. So the age and heavy use of the aircraft were contributing factors. What else did the investigation reveal?
The investigation also identified issues with the bonding method used in the plane's construction. The older method used in this particular aircraft relied on adhesives that were prone to weakening over time, especially in humid environments like Hawaii.
Right.
Unfortunately, the newer method, which uses stronger fasteners to hold the fuselage panels together, hadn't been implemented on this older plane.
So the combination of age, heavy use, and an outdated construction method created a perfect storm for this kind of catastrophic failure.
Precisely. And unfortunately, the investigation uncovered even more concerning details. It turned out that Aloha Airlines hadn't been conducting inspections as thoroughly as they should have.
Really?
In fact, they had even falsified records, claiming to have used a new testing method called eddy current testing, which they hadn't actually implemented.
Wait, so they lied about using a more advanced inspection technique that could have potentially detected the cracks before the incident. That's shocking.
Yeah.
What is eddy current testing, and why is it so important?
Eddy current testing is a non-destructive method that uses electromagnetic fields to detect flaws in conductive materials like aluminum, which is what aircraft fuselages are made of. It's extremely sensitive and can detect tiny cracks that might be invisible to the naked eye.
So had Aloha Airlines actually used this technique as they claimed, they might have caught those cracks in the fuselage early on.
That's a very real possibility. The eddy current testing could have revealed the weakening bonds and the potential for failure before the situation became catastrophic.
This raises some serious questions about the airline's safety culture and practices. It sounds like a combination of an aging aircraft, maintenance oversights, and potentially some lax regulatory oversight as well.
You're hitting on a key point. The Aloha Airlines incident exposed a gap in the industry's approach to aging aircraft and highlighted the urgent need for more rigorous inspection protocols and stricter enforcement of safety regulations. It was a wake-up call that couldn't be ignored.
It's a chilling reminder that even in a highly regulated industry like aviation, things can slip through the cracks.
Absolutely, and those cracks, both literally and figuratively, can have devastating consequences.
This brings us to the landing, which I can only imagine was one of the most tense moments in aviation history. What happened when the plane finally approached the runway?
The scene at Maui Airport was one of heightened anticipation and anxiety. Emergency services were on high alert, bracing for the worst. The passengers, having endured unimaginable terror, were undoubtedly holding their breath, hoping against hope for a safe landing.
What a harrowing situation. It must have felt like an eternity for those on board and those waiting on the ground.
Against all odds, at 1:58 p.m., just 13 minutes and 42 seconds after that horrifying explosion, Captain Schomsteimer and First Officer Tompkins managed to land the plane.
Wow.
It was a moment of collective relief and disbelief as the crippled aircraft touched down on the runway and slowly taxied to a stop.
I could only imagine the wave of emotion that washed over everyone in that moment. The passengers, the crew, the emergency responders, everyone who had been holding their breath, praying for a miracle.
It's a powerful testament to human resilience, both in the cockpit and in the cabin.
Yeah.
While there were injuries, including a skull fracture for one elderly passenger, it's a miracle that everyone on board, except for CB Lansing, survived.
It's a truly incredible story of survival against seemingly insurmountable odds. It speaks to the skill of the pilots, the resilience of the human spirit, and perhaps a bit of luck as well. But it also raises a lot of questions.
You're right. The incredible landing, while a cause for celebration, shouldn't overshadow the systemic failures that allowed this to happen in the first place.
Right.
This incident, with all its drama and heroism, forced the aviation industry to confront some uncomfortable truths about aging aircraft, maintenance practices, and the importance of a robust safety culture.
That's a crucial point. This isn't just a story of a miraculous escape, it's also a story of lessons learned, and a reminder that complacency can have devastating consequences.
Precisely. The investigation into Aloha Airlines Flight 243 had a profound impact, not just on the airline itself, but on the entire aviation industry. It prompted a wave of changes and improvements aimed at preventing a similar tragedy from ever happening again.
This is where the deep dive gets even more fascinating. We've explored the harrowing events of the flight, but now it's time to delve into the aftermath, the investigation, and the lasting impact this incident had on aviation safety. We'll be back in part 2 to explore these critical aspects of the story. Welcome back to our deep dive into Aloha Airlines Flight 243.
Oh.
It's a story that's both terrifying and inspiring.
Yeah.
A testament to human resilience and a stark reminder of the importance of safety. Last time, we explored the dramatic events of the flight itself, right?
Yeah.
The sudden decompression, the heroic actions of the crew,
Right.
the miraculous landing. Now let's shift our focus to the aftermath.
Okay.
And the investigation that followed. This is where things get really interesting, because it's not just about understanding what happened, but about learning from it to prevent similar incidents in the future.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The investigation into Aloha Airlines Flight 243 was a pivotal moment for the aviation industry.
Okay.
It was a wake-up call that forced a reassessment of safety practices, maintenance procedures, and the challenges of aging aircraft.
So let's dive into the findings. What were the key takeaways from the investigation?
Well, as we discussed earlier, the age of the aircraft and the outdated bonding method used in its construction played a significant role in the fuselage failure. But the investigation also uncovered some disturbing details about Aloha Airlines' maintenance practices.
Okay.
They weren't conducting inspections as thoroughly as they should have.
Oh, wow.
And they even falsified records about using a more advanced inspection technique called eddy current testing.
It's shocking to think that an airline would compromise safety in such a blatant way. What were the consequences for Aloha Airlines?
Well, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, imposed a hefty fine on Aloha Airlines.
Okay.
$10.2 million, which at the time was the largest civil penalty ever levied against an airline.
Wow.
The FAA also revoked the licenses of several mechanics who had been involved in the falsified inspection records.
That sounds like a pretty strong response from the FAA. Did they stop there?
Not at all. The Aloha Airlines incident prompted a much broader response from the aviation industry as a whole.
Okay.
There was a renewed focus on safety, a recognition that the existing regulations and practices weren't sufficient to prevent this kind of incident from happening again.
So what specific changes were implemented as a result of this incident?
One of the most significant changes was the implementation of the Aging Aircraft Safety Program in 1991.
Okay.
This program mandates stricter inspections and control programs for older aircraft to ensure they are airworthy and safe to operate.
Can you explain a bit more about what this program entails?
Certainly. The Aging Aircraft Safety Program requires airlines to implement more rigorous inspection programs for older aircraft, focusing on areas that are prone to fatigue and corrosion, like the fuselage.
Okay.
It also mandates the use of more advanced inspection techniques, like eddy current and ultrasonic testing, to detect cracks and other flaws that might not be visible to the naked eye.
So the Aloha Airlines incident basically forced the industry to adopt a more proactive approach to aircraft maintenance, focusing on preventing these types of failures before they occur.
Exactly. The incident highlighted the importance of going beyond simply checking off boxes on a maintenance checklist.
Yeah.
It emphasized the need for a deeper understanding of the aging process of aircraft and the potential vulnerabilities that emerge over time.
It's interesting to think about the ripple effect of this one incident.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about punishing Aloha Airlines. It was about using this tragedy as a catalyst for systemic change within the entire aviation industry.
Absolutely. The Aloha Airlines incident served as a wake-up call. prompting a shift from a reactive to a proactive approach to safety.
Right.
And it wasn't just about inspections and maintenance.
Yeah.
It was also about fostering a safety culture where everyone involved in aviation, from mechanics to pilots to air traffic controllers, feels empowered to speak up if they see something that could compromise safety.
You mentioned earlier that the Aloha Airlines incident had implications beyond just the aviation industry.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly. The lessons learned from this incident have resonated across many other industries, particularly those where aging infrastructure or complex systems pose potential risks to public safety.
That makes sense. Yeah. What are some examples of industries that have been influenced by the Aloha Airlines incident?
We'll take the oil and gas industry, for example.
Okay.
After a series of high-profile accidents, including the Deepwater Horizon oil spill,
Right.
there was a major push to improve safety regulations and oversight. The lessons learned from the aviation industry, particularly the importance of rigorous inspections and proactive maintenance, played a key role in shaping those reforms.
So the oil and gas industry basically looked at what happened with Aloha Airlines and said, we need to make sure something like that never happens on our rigs or pipelines.
Precisely. The Aloha Airlines incident provided a valuable case study in the importance of a proactive safety culture and the devastating consequences that can result from complacency or cutting corners.
Are there any other industries that have been influenced by this event?
Absolutely. The nuclear power industry is another prime example.
Okay.
The incident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan, which was triggered by a tsunami,
Right.
prompted a global reassessment of safety procedures and protocols at nuclear power plants. The Aloha Airlines incident, with its focus on the challenges of aging infrastructure and the importance of anticipating potential failure points, provided a valuable framework for evaluating and improving safety practices in the nuclear industry.
So even though these incidents occurred in very different contexts, the underlying lessons about safety culture, risk assessment, and the importance of continuous improvement are universal.
Exactly. The Aloha Airlines incident serves as a powerful reminder that safety is not just about following rules or implementing procedures.
Right.
It's about fostering a culture where everyone is empowered to speak up, challenge assumptions, and prioritize safety over expediency or cost cutting.
It's about creating an environment where everyone feels a sense of responsibility for safety, not just those in positions of authority.
Precisely. And that's a lesson that applies not just to large organizations like airlines or oil companies, but to any workplace, community, or even our own personal lives.
That's a powerful insight. It makes you think about all the potential hazards we encounter in our daily lives and the importance of being vigilant, not just for our own safety, but for the safety of those around us.
You're absolutely right. The Aloha Airlines incident, with all its drama and tragedy, ultimately provides a valuable lesson about the importance of a proactive safety culture, the need for continuous improvement, and the power of human resilience.
It's a story that continues to resonate, reminding us that safety is not just a set of rules or procedures. It's a mindset, a way of life.
And it's a journey, not a destination. We can always learn from past mistakes and strive to create a safer future for ourselves and generations to come.
This deep dive into Aloha Airlines Flight 243 has been incredibly insightful. We've explored the harrowing details of the incident, the heroic actions of the crew, the systemic failures that contributed to the near disaster, and the far-reaching impact it had on aviation safety and beyond.
It's been a privilege to explore this story with you and our listeners.
We'll be back in part 3 to wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and a provocative question to leave you pondering.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Aloha Airlines Flight 243. We've covered a lot of ground, from the heart-stopping moments of the flight itself to the industry-wide changes that followed. We've seen how a single incident can expose these systemic flaws, and how those flaws, if left unaddressed, can have catastrophic consequences.
It's a story that underscores the interconnectedness of engineering, human behavior, and organizational culture. It's a reminder that safety is not just about having the right procedures in place. It's about fostering an environment where those procedures are followed, where people feel empowered to speak up when they see something wrong, and where continuous improvement is embraced as a core value.
We've talked about how the Aloha Airlines incident influenced safety practices in other industries, like oil and gas and nuclear power. But what about the individual?
What lessons can we as individuals take away from this story? What can we do to promote safety in our own lives and communities?
That's a crucial question. I think it starts with recognizing that safety is everyone's responsibility.
Right.
It's not just something that experts or authorities handle. We all have a role to play in creating a safer world, whether it's at work, at home, or in our communities.
So it's about being more than just passive bystanders. It's about being actively engaged in safety, being observant, and speaking up when we see something that seems risky or unsafe.
Exactly. Sometimes it's as simple as reminding a friend to wear their seatbelt or pointing out a potential hazard to a coworker.
Yeah.
Other times it might involve reporting a safety violation to the appropriate authorities or advocating for stricter safety regulations in our communities.
It sounds like you're advocating for a shift in mindset, a move away from complacency, and a more proactive approach to safety. It's about recognizing that even small actions can make a difference.
Precisely. The passenger who noticed the crack on Aloha Airlines Flight 243 could have made a difference if they had felt empowered to speak up.
It's a stark reminder that even seemingly insignificant observations can be crucial. We should never underestimate the power of our own voices.
Yeah.
You've given us a lot to think about. This deep dive into Aloha Airlines Flight 243 has been a journey through a pivotal moment in aviation history. A story that highlights both the fragility of human life and the remarkable capacity for human ingenuity and resilience.
It's been a privilege to explore this story with you and our listeners. It's a reminder that safety is not just a destination, it's a continuous journey of learning, adaptation, and vigilance.
And it's a journey we must all embark on together. By embracing a culture of safety, by being observant, by speaking up when we see something wrong, and by learning from past mistakes, we can create a safer world for ourselves and for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.